Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Small Biz Updates. This is a partnership between NCTV 18, the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce, and the Keep the Rock Solid campaign. I'm Christy Ferrantella, the president of the Nantucket Chamber, and I'm joined today by Karen Maycumber, our small business consultant at the Nantucket Chamber, and Melanie Sabin, AVP of Commercial Loan Officer at Cape Cod 5. So thank you both for joining me.
Good afternoon.
So Melanie, I wanted to start off by thanking Cape Cod 5. I know you guys have been very involved in helping small businesses through COVID-19 and the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. So I wanted to start off by having you talk a little bit about the program and how it's been for Cape Cod 5.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. As you said, I'm with Cape Cod 5, and I've been there since 2011, and I've been in banking for 17 years. And to give you a little background on the Paycheck Protection Program, as most probably already know, but it's part of the CARES Act that was signed into law on March 27th, 2020 of this year, in response to the economic impacts of COVID-19. The overall intent of the PPP program is to keep workers paid and employed. The original program provided borrowers with funds to pay up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, including benefits, and the funds can also be used to pay interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities. The program had an initial allotment of $349 billion, which was exhausted after 14 days. The House passed an additional $310 billion in funds for the program, and as of June 6th, approximately $130 billion remains available for new applications. New applications will continue to be accepted through June 30th of this year. The program was first rolled out as a first-come, first-served basis, so people felt the urgency to apply and receive funding. Originally, we all thought that borrowers were going to be able to pick a date when they wanted to receive funding, and this all changed when guidance was issued stating banks had 10 days to fund all of the loans that they received approval for from the SBA. Due to this urgency and the timing to receive the funding, it wasn't ideal for many businesses as they didn't have a use for the funds at that time. This has been a frustrating process for many of our borrowers as they were forced to make decisions based on the rules at that time. And due to the flawed nature of the program, there has been pressure from day one for legislature to make changes. And some of these changes were finally just made on June 5th through the PPP Flexibility Act when it was signed by the president. So I guess, to answer your question, this has been a challenging process, the PPP program. It's constantly changing, and we're trying to stay up to date as much as the borrower is and as much as accountants are. Everyone is, constantly just reading updates, guidelines, and it's really kept us on our toes, I guess you could say.
Definitely. And I think one of the most important things that both Karen and I and everybody at the Chamber, and I'm sure you at Cape Cod 5 has been stressing, is the importance of talking with your accountant and lawyers and all of that, and trying to figure out what's best for your business and trying not to, give advice based on what we think, but just trying to provide the tools for businesses to make the decisions.
Exactly. No, that is great advice.
And this is a live Q&A, so if anybody wants to submit a question through YouTube, you can just submit it through the chat function. If you don't see the ability to submit a question, just refresh the page and then you can submit a question.
So Mel and I actually have one question for you. How on earth did the bank ramp up so quickly to accommodate all these loans? Because in a typical year, you are an SBA lender, but how many loans do you normally even write in a year?
Right. Well, to put into perspective, I thought this was great. The head of lending said we have around, I don't know if it's 2,000, I think we have 2,000 commercial relationships on our books. And, through this program, we've processed to date over 2,200 loans. So in that short amount of time, this was an all hands on deck operation. Majority of senior management has been involved from day one. it was something that Cape Cod 5 just felt that they needed to jump into because we're a small business community lender and our businesses were in need. And even though the program, is flawed and not implemented the way we would like to, we felt like it was necessary to jump in. And so we've all just been reacting and trying to do the best we can to get the funds to our borrower and help, kind of be a resource for them.
Well, and on behalf of so many small businesses that I talk to and work with, I think the bank has just done an amazing job trying to get these things through as quickly as possible and answer questions even when, as you know, they keep changing the goalpost on us. So thank you.
Thank you. That's great to hear. It really is.
So I know you mentioned a lot of the frustrations from small businesses. I know the first round we heard a lot of questions from seasonal businesses about how this would adapt or work for them. Can you go over a little bit of the new guidelines that were issued last week with President Trump signing the Flexibility Act?
Yes. Hold on, let me just grab my notes. So yes, last Friday, they did sign the Flexibility Act. And so it had three main changes to it. Some of them are as follows. The current PPP borrowers can choose to extend their 8-week period to 24 weeks, or they can keep the original 8-week period if they received approval from the SBA on or before June 5th. New PPP borrowers will have a 24-week covered period, but the covered period can extend beyond December 31st, 2020. This flexibility is designed to make it easier for more borrowers to reach full or almost full forgiveness. So that is huge because a lot of businesses haven't been able to be open or haven't been able to, use the funds in a way where the majority of it, will be forgiven. So extending out that 24-week period will help a lot of people. I think it's a double-edged sword. On the same rate, it's frustrating for the people that have already made decisions, based on the rules at that time. So we feel for our customers, and we're all just in this together. So another change that is very helpful is under the language in the House bill, the payroll expenditure requirement drops from 60 to 75%. So originally, the funds that you were approved for, you had to, in order for it to receive full forgiveness, you had to use 75% of the funds on payroll. And so now, hearing the frustration, from borrowers and small businesses that, they have a lot of other expenses that, they need to be able to pay, or that this would help with, it now is reduced to 60%. So 60% can be used for payroll, and 40%, the remaining 40% can be used towards that mortgage interest, rent, utilities, things along other eligible expenses.
Melanie, one thing, and I know because I had some questions about this myself in the beginning on this, just to be clear, so it's 60% of the amount that you actually use versus 60% of the amount that you're awarded. Is that's
yes,
correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
So yes, if you received 120,000 and you can only use 100,000, 60% of that 100,000, so the 60,000,
right.
will have to be used, to be forgiven, to be fully forgiven. So yes, you're correct. That's a good clarification. So one of the other changes too is, well, one of the other big ones is the borrowers now have 5 years to repay the loan instead of 2. So they extended that out, and that's at an interest rate of 1%. So that is eligible for new borrowers that haven't been approved, after Friday. So they will receive approval after Friday. So those are the three main changes, I would say. As we all know, we're waiting for additional guidance. We're hoping it would come, this week, or maybe, additional guidance through an interim final rule this week, hopefully next. They have said that they are going to, that they're trying to get it out to everyone quickly, because we're coming up on some people on, some borrowers 8-week period, in the next week or so, I'd say, based on when they received funding. So I think it's good to kind of, get that guidance out there and get, the new application, out there to borrowers to see what works best for them.
Right, and Melanie, there will be a brand new application for forgiveness, correct, with different calculations and things. That last one was a real beaut.
It really is. So I'm hoping, I mean, it says 75% all over that application. So I do feel that, you know, they're going to put a revised application out there just to clarify. And we're also hoping, you know, there's been some, you know, talk that they might make it a little bit easier. So a little bit, you know, easier to understand and complete.
Well, fingers crossed there.
Because we don't have anything else to do besides fill out those applications right now. So.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you mentioned that some businesses might be coming up on their 8-week period. Is there any possibility for businesses to apply for another PPP loan, or was it just a one-time offer?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a one-time. You know, they applied and they received, you know, funding, and that they're only allowed to apply once. So unfortunately, that is where it stands.
And for anybody who hasn't applied yet, can you remind them the deadline is June 30th?
Yes, June 30th to apply. And I think the calculation was, you know, if they receive funds by, it's like July 16th, they can receive full, you know, the full 24 weeks. So they'll have the benefit of having the full 24 weeks to use the funds for. If they receive funds after July 16th, their, you know, 24-week period will be shortened because December 31st is the deadline to, you know, eligible period.
Thank you.
Right, and I know there's been some kind of questions and confusion, especially for seasonal folks, about that, the difference between the 24-week period, and yet there's also language about the fact that or rehiring by December 31st. So as I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you do have that 24-week period to use that allotted funds, but if for some reason you decided that 24-week period was not going to go until towards the end of the year now, that as long as the folks were rehired and paid out by that December 31st, that's kind of the drop dead, if you will, for that.
Yeah, I that's how I understand it as well.
Okay.
And that is a very, I've spent a lot of time trying to look at the FTE and, you know, figure the calculation out, and the calculation in the application. There's a lot to it. So my guidance is, you know, talk to your accountant or talk to, you know, your bookkeeper and kind of come up with a plan on how you're going to do this, so that you can get to that, the end of the year and have your, you know, the full-time employee number hit by the December 31st. And, you know, I think it's, yeah. And then there's information about the average, you know, full-time employees and, you know, being employed. And so, you know, during that period. So I would definitely consult with your accountant, consult with your bookkeeper, come up with a plan. And, you know, there is talk out there. I don't want to get anyone's hopes up, but there is talk out there about also, you know, a safe harbor for businesses that were, you know, really impacted, like restaurants, hotels, B&Bs, you know, inns, that there might be a safe harbor there as well, that if you can't, due to COVID-19, hit those numbers, that that you might have safe harbor for that. But I have not seen anything written as of yet.
Yeah, and I think there was, supposedly there's a little more flexibility and forgiveness, if you will, related to numbers of employees and things like that.
Right.
But to your point, I don't know that there's been very specific guidelines out yet.
Right. Yeah, it's in the application, or they talk about it in the application, but I'm, you know, waiting for some more specific guidelines. And
Right.
yeah, so
Right.
more to come.
So another question we received is, are there any other loan opportunities for Nantucket small businesses?
There's always loan opportunities. I'm trying to think. right now there aren't any, programs, exactly like this one. I think a lot of people are receiving word back from the SBA if they applied for the EIDL loan. So I think that, that was an opportunity that they had. And, now it's just making the decision on whether or not more, debt makes sense. I think that, it's always just great to talk to your banker, whoever your banker is. And I think it's, great to have a candid conversation and just, tell them where you're at, and see what they have to offer. I know a lot of banks right now are offering, some, whether it's interest only on their, for a certain amount of time, or, residential mortgages, deferring the principal and interest for a certain amount of time. So, those type of relief plans are, a bank by bank case, I guess. So I would just suggest talking to your banker and, seeing what they can do. And I think that we're all waiting a little bit to see how the summer plays out, or how the season plays out, and see what else is needed, and what else the government will, allow the banks to do, or to help their borrowers.
And Melanie, I had read something about the Main Street lending program that was going to come through the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was structured to be larger loan amounts for folks, especially those that own real estate, I believe. Do you have any more information on that, or if Cape Cod's participating at all?
I know that we have sat in on some, not webinars, but Q&As, I guess. And I think we're still waiting to see what the final, parameters will be, to see if it, to see what makes sense. So,
Right.
So the bank hasn't made a decision as of yet. I think we're waiting to see, what the full program entails. So.
Gotcha. Chris, did we have any other new questions, Christy, that came in? I know there were.
Yeah. So what should I do regarding a commercial mortgage? Should I ask my bank for help? And if so, what do I need to show them to demonstrate I need help?
So I think that that's another, have the conversation with your banker or with your bank, and talk to them and see what they, can offer, what they can do for you, and what makes sense. The commercial world is different than residential. Commercial, it isn't a one size fits all. We're, kind of in the custom business, and everyone is different. Everyone, you're incorporated differently. Some people have, every case is different. So I would say talk to your banker and see what they can do for you.
Thank you. And I know you mentioned before the PPP program has a 1% interest rate. Is that the same for business and nonprofit? Or I know with the EIDL there was different rates. What is it with the PPP?
Yep, no, it is. It's 1% across the board. And so the idea is that 1% accrues, it started accruing from day one, but if your loan is forgiven in its entirety, then the interest accrued will also be forgiven. If you have a $100,000 loan and only $80,000 is forgiven, the $20,000 you'll have to pay interest on the portion that is not forgiven.
Thank you.
Melanie, I think they also in the new guidelines had something to the effect that the deferment period originally was going to be like 6 months, I think, and now that actually might be a little bit longer, depending on perhaps when you apply for forgiveness. I think that maybe when I read.
Yes, I think it's.
I want to say 10 months. I read somewhere. Okay.
That is what I have heard as well.
Okay.
Yes, so they have 10 months.
Right. Okay. Every month counts at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, have you seen a huge uptick in new applications since these new guidelines came out?
We haven't seen a huge uptick. There definitely are loans trickling, still trickling in, and we process those right away. And so as long as we have everything, a complete application. So we processed so many in the first round, and then in the beginning of the second round, I feel that a lot of people that have, are eligible or would like to apply have already applied, but maybe people, as they're finding out more about the program and that we're apprehensive about applying beforehand, now it makes sense. And so I definitely would encourage those people to apply.
And I would imagine the turnaround is relatively quick then? Okay.
Yes. Now that the backlog, we don't have the same backlog, or all the banks don't have the same backlog that they had, beforehand. So I believe that everyone is processing things a lot faster these days.
Okay, which is wonderful. I mean, we try and encourage everyone, again, to talk to their accountants, but 1% interest is, that's real cheap money,
Right.
even with the interest rates these days. So just having the extra cash on hand for small businesses is not a bad thing, especially because there is not a prepayment penalty, correct?
No, there is not.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And I know that the Chamber's been receiving a lot of questions with the new guidelines of kind of who is eligible. And so just as a reminder, do you want to go over kind of the different entities that are eligible to apply for the PPP?
Yes. So all businesses are eligible. So LLCs, sole proprietors, S corps, partnerships, nonprofit organizations can apply or eligible. I think it's 501c3s and Karen, what 501?
I think it's C19.
C19.
Right, it's a 501c6 cannot.
Yes, 501c6, so yes.
The chamber.
That excludes the chamber, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, so yes, so I would say it's not the majority of people that are incorporated or do have a small business, are eligible to apply and receive funding. But the program guidelines, or the loan amount, is based off of payroll. So that is where, if businesses, if a S corp, has only one employee and they're not paying themselves a salary, as they're the owner and they're taking distributions, they might not qualify, for a loan because there's no payroll there. So some businesses, are eligible to apply, but as how they do their accounting, it ends up excluding them from being able to receive funding. So we have run into a little bit of that. Sole proprietors or their loan amount is based off of net profit. So if they're reporting their income on a Schedule C, it's based off of their net profit. So I would suggest looking at the Treasury website. It's pretty clear on there. They have how do I calculate my loan amount? And so it goes through every business on the website. And so I would just go to that website and just look at it and see, what you are. And I would have my, 2019 tax return, or my 2019 940 or 4 quarters of 941s. And I would, look at that website and see what I'm eligible for.
Have you had quite a few sole proprietors applying? I'm just curious.
Yes, we have. Yep.
Okay. That's great. I know a number of them were kind of going back and forth on unemployment versus PPP and what made the most sense for them. And I think some are doing a combination of both.
Right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't see any more live questions. Karen, do you have any more questions for Melanie?
No, I think Melanie, have you had any word from the SBA in terms of when they expect to issue the new application or these, more direct guidelines for forgiveness?
they have been saying that they are trying to get it out as quickly as possible. So I don't know. We haven't heard a specific date, but from historical, when they vote in a new law or changes, it tends to be, another week to 10 days before they issue the guidelines. So, last Friday. So, possibly this week, maybe hopefully, next week at the latest. So I haven't heard, but yeah. So, oh, one other thing I was thinking of, in terms of the forgiveness, I know a lot of, I know it's changing, and I know, it's a confusing application. But one website I found was the AICPA. It's a pretty comprehensive website. They actually have a calculator out there that helps kind of borrowers walk you through that forgiveness application, and it kind of pre-fills fields, and so I think that would be worth, if people are if they're trying to see if they want to use the 8-week or the 24-week, I would say go onto that website, look at their forgiveness calculator, and or their forgiveness application, and put in some numbers and see what kind of makes sense for you. Thank
you. Are there any other tips and tricks you want to let everybody know about?
I wish I had more. No, I really do. And I can send you that link as well, Christy, so you can circulate it out if you want. But no, we're just taking it day by day, trying to digest the new, changes, and yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. I know we're always updating our fact sheet at the Chamber between the EIDL and the PPP and other programs, Main Street. Where else can people go to find updated information?
So I'd say I constantly look at the SBA website. They're issuing it's FAQs, frequently asked questions. So they're constantly, answering a new question, and it just kind of adds some clarity. Usually it's a question that's been asked by a lot of people, so they put the clarification out there. So I would go to the SBA website, I would go to the Treasury website, and they have a whole, like I said before, a PPP loan program and COVID-19 resource center. I've seen a lot of accountants have a resource center as well, and Cape Cod 5 also has a resource center. So you can go to Cape Cod 5, and there's a business tab, and then you click down, there's the Paycheck Protection Program, and you just scroll down to the bottom, and there's a resource center there as well, so you can go and see what we have listed. So I would, yeah, there's lots of reading out there. I just make sure that you're reading from a reputable source.
And perhaps starting with the FAQ, starting at the very bottom and working your way back.
Yes, exactly.
So that you actually get the most current information.
That is right. I know. It's amazing how far, or all the changes and how far.
I think they're at question 1000 now.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Melanie, so much for joining us today and talking about the PPP program. Karen and I are going to go over a couple of Chamber updates for this week. And we thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to help everybody understand the program.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you, Melanie, very much.
Thanks, Karen. Bye, Christy.
Bye. So Karen, do you want to give a little bit of update on things that are going on at the Chamber with our fact sheet and resources for small businesses?
Certainly. So I just updated our wonderful fact sheet this morning with the very latest and greatest on the PPP. We also have information in there still about EIDL. Not that you can apply for that still, but at least at this point, we really have a lot of history to understand kind of how the whole process works, when you'll see money, when you'll get communication. So you can kind of read through all of that. PPP will continue to update it. There's also some information about the Main Street lending program, as Melanie mentioned. I think the Federal Reserve still has to release some more information and guidelines on that. but I think that's well worth checking into. The last thing I will mention is if you are a property owner yourself, I think it's just at least worthwhile for you to talk to a banker and an SBA banker and see if perhaps it makes sense for you to look even into a refinance through the SBA right now. My understanding is if that refinance closes before either beginning or end of September, you're still eligible for some of the benefits that they've been giving to folks who are currently borrowers, which includes some deferment, as well as even, I believe, up to 6 months of forgiveness of the SBA portion of the interest on your loan. So that can be pretty substantial for some folks. I know I'm looking into it myself. So happy to share more information on that.
So I know we spoke a lot today about the PPP, and there's still people and businesses out there who applied for the EIDL and are still waiting for communication. What is the timeline that you're hearing for businesses to hear back?
Yeah, I think an awful lot of them have been processed at this point. I know there are some where there's additional documentation that's being requested. So because it is a loan, so they are trying to make sure that you can repay it at some point. I would say if for any reason if you've applied and you put in for the advance, which as we know you can ask for up to $1,000 per employee, up to $10,000, and you've not received that advance already, I would definitely reach out to the SBA. Typically what we're seeing is the advance is processed relatively quickly, and after that you then are provided information about where you are in the loan process. And this is all through the SBA for the EIDL, it's not through the bank.
Right, thank you for that. Are there any other resources for small businesses right now?
Well, besides the chamber website, of course, our lovely COVID area where Marina's been doing a great job kind of keeping that updated. I think everybody's really busy right now getting ready to reopen now that phase 2 is here, which is wonderful.
And just a reminder for everybody watching, phase 2 for Massachusetts started this Monday, June 8th. And it allows for retail to open up at a limited capacity. We have 8 customers per 1,000 square feet. We have restaurants opening for outdoor dining, and we luckily have lodging open. So Karen is getting ready to open Sherburne Inn.
Yes, we're allowed to actually have guests again that are not essential workers. There's quite a bit of, there are a lot of safety guidelines, protocols, things that will change the way that someone experiences the inn to some extent. But the good news is that in most cases you'll be able to still have a wonderful experience and room and take advantage of everything that Nantucket has to offer and stay safe. So,
absolutely. And I know I was downtown yesterday. Everybody was wearing masks. We're in and out of stores. It really felt like summer was coming alive on Nantucket. So it was a very pleasant experience after 3 months indoors.
Yes, and very pleasant that the cancellations for reservations have now slowed to a standstill, and we're seeing some new inquiries for reservations coming in July and August. So that's really, really exciting that we're kind of getting back there.
That's amazing. And just to wrap up the show, I wanted to remind everybody that the Chamber has a webinar tomorrow with Freestyle Strategy. It's on cause marketing, and it's really meant for nonprofits and retail, but everybody can join in. Melissa Gladstone is an amazing background in marketing and social impact strategist, and she'll be leading a webinar for all of our members. So you can find out more at nantucketchamber.org. And as always, check out our COVID page for resources. The Chamber has also launched a What's Open page at nantucketchamber.org/open. So you can view all the retail, lodging, and outdoor dining experiences and other essential businesses that have been open through COVID. So thank you all, and thank you, Karen, for joining us today.
Thank you, Christy, and let's go out and enjoy this beautiful day.
All right, thank you.